Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Women of Golf. I'm your host, Ted Odorico, and of course, alongside me every week is none other than one of the hardest working gals in ladies golf, and that would be LPGA professional Cindy Miller. Cindy, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah, Cindy, it's hard to believe. I was just thinking here a few minutes ago before we went live on air that we're already in another month. Today is July 1st. Can you believe that?
Wow. How long have we been doing this?
I don't know. It seems like
Are we
forever.
married now?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we probably should be. No, I couldn't do that to Alan. Alan,
you don't want to be married.
I'll have to have a chat with Alan first before I make that commitment. But anyways, no, it's just hard to believe. I just can't believe that we're already into another month, and literally half of 2014 is over. And of course, just in a couple of days, 3 days coming up, of course, is another major U.S. holiday, the July 4th, Independence Day, big celebration, lots of great activities across the country going on. So make sure that you guys be safe out there. But today we're going to talk about golf, and we're going to be continuing on with Cindy's really great series, Own Your Game, Part 7. And this one, of course, is emotionally stable. And this is going to be an interesting one. But let me just remind everybody a couple of quick things, Cindy, before we start. Don't forget, we're on every week, every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's Eastern Standard Time on blogtalkradio.com. And you can get there two quick ways. You can either put the / after blogtalkradio.com and type in Women of Golf, or you can just go up in the search key and type in Women of Golf. You can get there either way. Don't forget, if you want to call into the program at any time during the live broadcast, which is 9 to 10 a.m. Eastern on Tuesday mornings, you can do so at area code 347-945-5855. And you can also email comments or questions, or if you're interested in being on the show, womenofgolf@gmail.com. And don't forget, if you ever want to get in touch with Mrs. Miller, of course, you can do so through her website, cindymillergolf.com, or you can email her personally at cindy@cindymillergolf.com. Cindy, before we get into today's part of the series, let me just very quickly recap some of the topics that we talked about just in the last couple of weeks. This is really part of the head game, which is sort of a series within a series, if you will. It's part of the Own Your Game, and it's the mind management and thought control, 8 champion personality traits via Golf Site. And the first one we did, of course, was cool, narrow focus, and that was really an indicator of your ability to separate yourself from people and circumstances during whether you're playing in an LPGA event like Cindy Miller does, or whether you're playing in a corporate event. You need to have the ability to keep focus and narrow that focus for the tasks at hand. And also, we also talked about abstract thinking, and that's really the ability to use your intellect to your advantage rather than disadvantage when you're playing in a round. And it doesn't have to be a competitive round, but just maybe as I said, you're playing at a corporate event, and that really helps you to, with your abstract thinking, helps you to do such tasks as club selection, course management, and of course create shots and a myriad of other things. We've talked about that the last few weeks, and if you've missed those, make sure you go back to our website, blogtalkradio.com / Women of Golf. And if you go down through the on-demand section, you can miss any of the episodes that you might have missed. But today you're live with us, and Cindy, we're gonna talk about emotionally stable. So why don't you set that one up a little bit and explain to everybody what you mean by that?
Well, what it means is your ability to minimize your emotional reactions to everything, good or bad. including your shots, your lies, your luck, the fans, the conditions, the marshals, the cameras, if there's cameras, your parents, if they're watching you, your pains, you name it, almost everything. So one of the things that I've been told and now teach is that if someone came up to watch you play, you want them to have no idea whether you're playing good or bad. So you don't want to be walking, slouched over with your head down like, oh, my goodness, you stink. You can't do this. You can almost read their body language. And we teach a lot of kids. In fact, we start junior camps today. And we tell them, you really want to play in college. I got news for you. If a coach walked up and watched your body language, they would just go, oh, high maintenance here. We don't want that. So you really have to be aware of what's going on in your head and what your body is showing what's going on in your head.
Right. And explain why that is so important. Why, for the average person, obviously you play on a tour, the Legends Tour and that, and in your line of work, it's obviously extremely important to have, be emotionally stable. You have to be in control of your emotions. But why is it important for the average high handicapper out there? Why is it important that they also be in control?
Because if you're one to really, really feel your emotions, you need to remember that those emotions are largely determined by your conscious thoughts.
Right.
And so, what you're thinking is showing up. And if you're in the habit of thinking things that arouse your emotions, again, that's thought control and mind management. Mm-hmm. Oh, you suck. You always do this on this hole. You hate playing in front of people. Your parents are going to, tell you can't play anymore or something. You're more likely to experience your emotions during competition. An example would be, if you allow yourself to think such things, life isn't fair, golf isn't fair, I've been cheated out of a great round, you're likely to experience, a surge of performance inhibiting anger or sadness, which also depends on other factors. But if you're largely emotional, it's going to show up. And so you have to learn how to tame your thoughts, which in turn will tame your emotions.
And that's something, obviously, that happens. We see that quite often, on the tours. You'll see a lot of times somebody be having a great round and maybe suddenly will have a bad hole or two. Now, some people will recover, have good control of their thoughts, but others will allow those negative emotions to, as you say, to creep in, and you'll just see them. It'll look like they just melted out on the golf course. What's happening in a case like that, do you think?
I believe it's hesitation. And so let's say you're coming into the last 4 holes, you're going to have the best round of your life, all your playing partners are, do you know that you only have 34 to here? And so you're trying to protect instead of pursue, and then you're going to get a little steery. You're going to try to help guide the club, and I call it the clenched butt cheek factor. Instead of pursuing, you're like, uh-oh, look out. So you're not swinging as freely as you might have been or playing as aggressively. So the minute the hesitation shows up, you've opened the door for doubt. And when you have doubt, you're not going to be as clear. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I think also, too, Cindy, the other thing that people don't realize, and some people that may be tuning into the program that aren't playing at a professional level or maybe don't play in a lot of big events, might be wondering, well, why or how does this really apply to me? And I think that you have to put things in perspective. Obviously, if you're playing in more competitive nature, it's going to be more applicable. But I think in everyday life, I think if you have control of your emotions, it's going to affect the attitude that you have throughout your life, and you're going to enjoy things much more. As you said, if you're always kind of slumped over with your head down and thinking negative thoughts all the time, it's going to dictate your attitude for the day. And once you've sort of started off your day like that, it's very difficult with the proper techniques to recover. And especially if you want to become a better golfer, regardless of what level you want to be at, you need to have a positive attitude, and your emotions are going to affect your attitude at some point if you're not careful. And it's better to be positive than negative. Would you agree?
Well, yes, I totally agree. So that would bring us to how do I recover?
Mm-hmm.
I have a certain woman that I teach who has only played for a year. And so I try to warn people that the game of golf can become mental torture, especially depending upon your behavior style. And she's very methodical, analytical, cautious, fearful. So every time she comes in for our group session, which we call perfect practice, now why did the ball do that? And she looks at me like it's my fault, right? And so I say, well, where did the ball go? Well, it always goes to the right. Why does it go to the right? I don't know.
Right.
Well, where's the club face pointing? Again, so we have to back out of this. Where's the club face pointing? The club face cannot be pointed left and have the ball go to the right. Sorry, it's not happening. So I say, well, the face must have been pointing to the right. Now, guess who's controlling the club face?
Mm-hmm.
Bam, personal accountability. But I can't feel it. That's okay. Let me help you. So the facts are the facts. The ball went to the right because the face is pointed right. So she's only digging herself into a hole. It's almost like she's being a martyr because of the internal obstacles that are inhibiting her from saying, all right, wait a minute, I got to fix this. The ball keeps going to the right. The face is pointing to the right. What am I doing to make that happen?
Yep.
So that's what I would, that's what I intend to hear at the end of the lesson, which Saturday she said, thank you so much. Now, part of me wanted to slap her at the beginning, and because it's like, well, you get so frustrated because she's only been taking lessons for a year. And you want to say, I have explained this before. You need to stop and become aware of your thoughts. Because your thoughts are controlling what you're doing with the club. So now let's tame them and be in control of what you do with the club face. So it doesn't matter whether you're just playing, you're just learning. If the ball doesn't go up in the air, the club didn't go down. Okay, so how do we fix that? So my biggest question to all my students, and it doesn't matter if you're just playing for fun, if you can't get it airborne, you're playing the first time in your life, why did the ball just do that? Answer the question, why? Yeah. And if you back that out, you can absolutely fix every shot, always, forever.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, knowledge is key in any aspect of life, but particularly here in golf. When you understand why things are happening the way they are, it makes it so much easier, to be able to work through them. I think what a lot of students don't understand, and this is something that, obviously we're doing more and more in the teaching end, is trying to help them to understand what's been happening. Years ago it was a matter of just, if you have a good grip and that sort of thing. And those are all important, don't get me wrong. But, I think now it's more important. People need to understand why the ball is reacting the way it is and why it's moving in the direction it is and what's causing it. And once it's sort of the cause and effect, once they understand that, and understand how they can correct it, then it makes it easier that when they're out, on the practice tee and they're working on their game and getting ready maybe to play around and they're starting to have a problem, they can kind of address it and say, okay, I understand why I'm doing that. Now, if it's a problem that is going to take a little more time, they may have to go and play with what they're dealing with that particular day and work at it a different time. But, once they have those tools and those understandings, it makes life so much easier for the student and certainly for the teaching professional as well. But emotions play such a huge thing. And Cindy, there's a lot of things that, I think first people need to understand, and you've got some great recommendations here. We need to identify the origins of your emotions. So in other words, we need to find, if you're experiencing a lot of emotion, especially during a round, that we need to try and label and identify these emotions and what's causing the origin. So as an example, elation, for instance. Talk about a little bit of these and just sort of explain each one.
Well, again, I'd like to back up. You need to develop some techniques for replacing your thoughts and controlling your thoughts, because that's often the first step towards controlling your emotions. Other factors that could influence your emotions are high tension, low confidence. If you don't have the ability to pull a shot off, you might have unrealistic expectations, and that's going to determine what shot choice you might make. So you need to be very realistic in your ability, because you could be sabotaging yourself just because you don't have the technique to be able to pull off a shot. Physiological factors, I had a woman the other day who started shaking, and I said, do you need something to eat? It's been really, really hot in Buffalo, 85 to 90, which in Buffalo it's like, really? And and she said, yeah. So you have to be very aware of what's going on with you physiologically. Have you been eating enough? Are you drinking enough water? Are you dehydrated? You can also take this assessment that I am doing this series on, happens to be my assessment from Golf Psych, because I wanted to find answers to why I don't perform as good as I would like to. This is called the endless pursuit of personal potential here with Cindy Miller, because I'm always trying to find answers to why don't I do better. What's wrong with me?
Right.
So if you're interested in that, email me at cindy@cindymillergolf.com. But Champions, Deborah Graham did this for her PhD, and she came up with these 8 traits. So Champions play to a 7 on this scale. So they're well above their average, the average in their ability to remain emotionally stable and detached. Needless to say, you can see some out there that are playing that are not as well detached, but and they show color, as we call it, when they hit a good or a bad shot. So you need to be able to handle the frustrations of golf readily by seeing them as challenges rather than deterrents. So this is a new opportunity to see if you can hit a shot with a gun to your head and not pull the trigger yourself. So depending on your behavior style, which in the next coming weeks we're going to have the opportunity for listeners to take a behavior assessment to find out where do they sit here, what would their tendencies be depending on their behavior. It's not that champions aren't affected, but they choose not to let the quality of their play influence the heights or depths of their emotions because they've learned. So the more you play, the more you can become aware of your thought control and mind management and realize, I need to eat every 3 or 4 holes. I got to make sure I drink enough water. And the catch is they have to be able to stay in their focus and concentration to stay competitive. But when they do experience emotions, they make quick use of mental techniques to channel, the emotions that might help them have greater focus. So, again, you have to stop and say, all right, what's the possible origin of the emotion? So, kids, and again, I feel like I need to help them before they can have bad thoughts and help them learn to recover. We take them out every Friday, and we do these playing lessons and things, and there's one student that happens to always hit it fat and hit it to the right. And I said, all right, let's hit another ball. Let's recover from that. What is that? I said, you've got to change your thinking. You can do this. And so they look at you like, really? Instead of, their parents putting their heads down like, oh, here we go again. You can't do that. You're developing an anchor. So where is the emotion coming from? I always miss it like this. No, you don't. Stop. We can fix this. You have to put the boundaries up. Again, elation, like you mentioned a few minutes ago, playing well, you're in contention, great shot, great putt. Wanting too much, reacting too much to good play, like, oh, wow, I've got this now. Oh, don't. Those are the worst 4 words in golf. Never say, I've got this now, because it will change on the next swing. And it will be because, you think you've got it.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever experienced that yourself?
Oh, many times. I can't begin to count. I don't have enough fingers and toes to tell you how many. And that's the thing. you can be on an emotional high, if you will, or elated because you're having a great round, and literally one swing can just, it's like sitting on a stool, and somebody can kick that stool out from underneath you, and it can change in a matter of seconds. But yeah, we've all done that, myself included, and it's a very humbling experience when it does, because when you sort of develop that mindset that, you're on a roll and you've played, 4 or 5 great holes, and then suddenly you make a couple of bad swings and you've had a dismal hole. Suddenly now the elation disappears, and, frustration and some of the other emotions come in. And yeah, believe me, I've experienced that myself many times.
Okay, another thing that might happen, the origin could be anger, with yourself, with the game of golf, with
right.
resolve personal issues at the office, you want to slap somebody, you're angry, you had an issue and you didn't deal with it and close it up. Anger that you always play a certain hole bad, anger that you miss shots, which might come from expectations that are too high. You can sit and get mad at yourself, but you have to say why. Why am I angry with myself? Because you don't do this. Why don't you do this? And that would go back to the answer that Alan gave me. Cindy, this has nothing to do with your golf swing and everything to do with your head. Well, now, did I want to hear that? No, I didn't want to hear that. I wanted to blame somebody else or something else. Do I really want to look in the mirror and go, okay, am I afraid to win? Am I afraid to lose? Do I believe I deserve to win? Which, wow, that's a big one. I found out when we did the scan on my brain that I didn't believe I deserved to win. So if you want to understand the present, you got to examine the past. Example being me playing in a Legends Tour event with all these Hall of Famers. What do you think my internal thoughts are? Wow, you're playing with Nancy Lopez today. She's in the Hall of Fame. She's won millions on the LPGA Tour. You're Cindy from Silver Creek. Who do you think you are? What are you doing playing with her? Are you that good? You're not good enough to do that. Well, my picture of me had to change. I don't know if I told you the story about playing at the BJ's Charity Championship after I'd finished 7th at their the team championship. Barb Moxness and I had finished 7th, and the tournament before, I finished 2nd in the Hy-Vee Classic. This is right after I finished playing on the big break. And so I was finished, and I figured out that I finished 7th, and I thought, you know what, you might be 2nd on their year-end money list.
Right.
And my big deal was I wanted to be exempt so I could play in all the tournaments. And so I found out that, yes, indeed, I did finish 2nd on the year-end money list. So 2nd on the money list, okay? The next day we're playing in a charity pro-am with 40 teams. I've got Jan Stevenson and Cindy Rare right behind me. So if there's 40 teams playing, what's that tell you? It's very slow. So there's 2 groups waiting on every hole. So they have to stand there and watch me hit. So what do you think my internal thoughts are? Wow, don't mess this up. You've got Cindy Rarick and Jan Stevenson, who just tied for first yesterday, watching. Make sure you make a good swing. I wonder what they think of your swing. That's what's going on in my head. And it was about 3 holes later, I had what I call a delayed intelligence attack. And the little voice said to me, you just finished 2nd on the money list for the year. You made more money this year playing on this tour than they made. Do you really care what they think of your golf swing? But see, because of my past, I didn't play on tour very long. I lost my card. I wasn't good enough. That's what my picture was of me. I had to change my picture. So where was the fear, or the frustration coming from? Way past.
Well, and the other thing, too, is I think what happens with a lot of people, Cindy, is we set ourselves up, instead of setting ourselves up for success, we set ourselves up for failure by, recalling all of this, our Rolodex of the past, all of the frustrations and challenges that we've, have let us down over the time. And it's not just something that can happen just last week. It can be from years ago, maybe in a tournament or in an event or just, you know what I'm saying, or something that's happened. And as we've talked about before earlier in our broadcast, golf in many, many ways mimics life. In so many ways it parallels life because it's really a great, as you said, a journey. It's a personal challenge. And if you can master to a point, obviously nobody's going to be a true master of the game, but some are better than others. But, if you can master your emotions here, it's going to help you in your day-to-day life. And the best way, I think, to do that is to just, instead of focusing on the things that you can't do, focus on the things that you can do, and then try to improve the things that you can't along the way. And slowly but surely, you'll build a more positive imagery, if you will, because nobody's going to hit every shot perfectly, right?
Correct. No, they can't.
Right.
Physically
Even
impossible.
I mean, there isn't a player on this planet, I don't care how long they've played, what level they're playing, that has not hit bad shots. So if somebody that is a 25 or 35 handicap thinks that they're not going to hit a bad shot, or when they do hit a bad shot, is going to beat themselves up, well, Tiger Woods, Nancy Lopez, Jan Stevenson, yourself, all of some of the better players out there have all hit bad shots.
This week.
Michelle Wie.
But she went from making every putt to not making any.
Exactly.
And again, that's just when, the magic can come and the magic can go.
Well,
so
here's
quickly.
Let me put this real quickly in perspective, and then we'll continue on. What always baffles me when I talk with students, and I'm sure you've experienced the same thing, is when you're sort of assessing their situation, you're talking to them about things, and they'll say, well, I'm hitting it to the right all the time, or I'm hitting it fat, and so on and so forth. And there's such a, you can just hear it in their voice. There's such a negative tone. And I think to myself, frustration. And I'll say to them, well, how often do you play? Well, I might play, once a week if I'm lucky, maybe once every 2 weeks. How often do you go out and practice? Well, again, maybe the same if I'm really lucky. Okay. So then I say, well, look at it this way. You've got somebody like a Tiger Woods that is out practicing every single day, plays virtually golf every single day since the age of about 3, and he hits bad shots. So what makes you think that somebody at his level, if he's going to hit some bad shots here and there, that somebody like yourself who hardly ever goes out and plays, how can you expect not to hit bad shots?
Right, and that goes to the expectation level. And one of where the thoughts, the emotions can come from, the origin, could be frustration. Mm-hmm. But your frustration is not from realistic expectations. So you have to stop and put everything into perspective. And when you do that, you realize, wow, who do I think I am? Again, and that would be the same with me. I can go out and play well, and I can go out and play terrible. And so what I do is I say to myself, okay, look, you're playing against all these women that have won, I should be grateful I'm here, So it's all the expectation of, who do you really think you are? And back it up, girl. This is not reality.
Right. Exactly. Something else, too, that's very common with a lot of, especially your higher handicappers. I mean, obviously you see it a little bit out in the tour, but is there's a lot of impatience. People just are not realistic.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. There's a lot of what?
A lot of impatience, I think, is another one that people really struggle with, especially the higher handicap players. You know, and I'm sure you've seen this. I mean, we see it out in the tour a little bit, but not to the same degree, obviously, as we do with the higher handicappers. But, you know, they're not realistic in their expectations. And when things don't happen the way, they're just extremely impatient. It's, well, you know, I need to hit a better shot, and I just can't do it. And it just, you can see the frustration, again, building up. But they're just not patient. They're just not willing to put in the time and take the time.
And again, I totally agree with you. And it comes from unrealistic expectations. If you think you're supposed to do that, or some of these kids will watch people play golf and see them bang clubs. I'm like, whoa, 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 what are we doing here? Stop. You know, again, I don't want to be able to look at you and tell how good or bad you're playing. So if you're that impatient, then you think this is not realistic. You think you're better than you are. You're in denial land, and we need to back it off.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you know, the thing is, much like in every other aspect of life, there is going to be some disappointment. You're not going to win every tournament. You're not going to hit every shot perfectly. You know, there's a lot of factors involved, but you're going to have some disappointment, and that's okay. Sometimes disappointment can actually be an advantage. It's like a failure. Sometimes failures, we can learn from them. So it's good to have a little bit of those. I mean, do you know what I mean?
Absolutely right. And it's funny because I'm doing an event. I'm speaking at the Microsoft World Partner Conference in a couple of weeks. And one of my topics, I've got two, but one of them is the privilege of pressure. Mm-hmm. And so I happen to have the video clip from Rory McIlroy after he won the U.S. Open a couple months after he had gagged his guts out at the Masters. And so Bob Costas is interviewing him and said, you know, well, tell us why you played differently today or better or whatever it is. You know, why do you have different results today than you did the last round of Augusta? And he said, well, I learned some things about my game and myself, and I put them into practice today. And as you can see, they worked. And so Bob Costas asked him, well, do you want to share those? And he said, no, I don't. So, you know, again, and I that was the greatest interview. So we saved it because we need to share with people, you know, you have to learn how to deal with the privilege of pressure. Everyone pursues coming to the top or trying to get to the top or, you know, becoming the CEO of a company. Well, did you ever think about what their life is like? Live a day in their shoes. How much responsibility do they have? So when you have disappointment with unmet goals or high expectations or the outcome is too important to you, you know, maybe your identity is too closely aligned. You know, oh, I should win this. That tournament I played in last week, one of my LPGA friends who couldn't be with me because she was teaching at the LPGA Girls Golf Club school in Asheville, North Carolina, she called me yesterday. She goes, who finished second?
Wow.
And I laughed, and I said, that doesn't always happen. You can't assume that you're going to win. I said I was grateful enough to win. You know, I'm glad I won, but I had to focus on the task at hand. But you could have your, you know, identity too closely aligned with the results. Well, I should win this. I've only won this 15 of the last 16 years. You know, I'm the best player in the country club. You should win the club championship. So, again, you could have disappointment because you're focused more on the results than the process. You must stay focused on the process. But as Rory said, you know, he learned some lessons. What do I need to think? Stacey Lewis on Sunday, you know, I was more nervous here playing in front of all these people than I was in the last round of the U.S. Open. Why? Because she doesn't want to disappoint all of her fans. She knows, they know how important it is for an Arkansas girl to win in Arkansas. And God bless her for pulling it off. That was great.
Yep.
And now, don't think she wasn't disappointed the week before losing to Michelle Wie. So, again, you've got to stop and look at the backstory. What did she learn by losing the U.S. Open to enable her to win in Arkansas? Don't think she didn't put some new things into practice, because I'm almost positive she did.
Yeah, and that's really the difference. Everybody focuses on the ball striking and that. Obviously, the players on tour, regardless of what tour it is, obviously they're very accomplished players. But the real key to their success is not necessarily their playing ability, but it's the control of their emotions and also the ability to focus on the tasks at hand that are far superior than the average player out there. Because once you have the general ability to hit a decent ball, you can pretty much tackle most courses out there. But you have to have a certain amount of confidence, and how you get that confidence is being in control of your emotions. It's like any business out there. To be successful in business, you have to be in control of your surroundings, and you're not going to control everything, but you have to understand what realistic expectations you may have of sales that particular day, and you have to set goals and so on and so forth. We're going to talk about that in a minute here, but this is what really differentiates the pros from the amateurs. It's not just their physical playing ability, but it's their ability to handle themselves under stressful situations. And once you can conquer that, certainly better than what most do now, you're going to find your abilities to accomplish the goals that you may have are going to be far easier than what they currently are.
Yes, and so our next emotion here that might, you need to become aware of is fear.
Yeah.
So in order to learn how not to be as scared, you need to expose the fear, which means you now need to go play in the situation that you're most fearful of, so that you can say to yourself, what am I afraid of? I'm not afraid of the shot. I'm afraid of looking bad.
Right.
I'm afraid of failing, or maybe of success, or maybe of embarrassment. I don't want to look stupid. You must uncover the source of each one specifically. And when you uncover the source, then you need to expose the fear, and you need to go do it. So you will see time after time on the LPGA and the PGA Tour, for winning and losing, and some of those who lose and almost embarrass themselves the most times, if they expose themselves more, they will learn and become great champions. And that's what happened with Rory. Rory gagged it at the last round of the Masters and came back and won the U.S. Open. Now, that's probably the greatest story. Stacey Lewis used to blow it all the time. Lorena Ochoa would always gag it on the last day. And once she learned to overcome that and exposed her fear, she became a great champion. Same thing with Annika.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember a few weeks back you telling the story of Annika. This is something, too, that I think that the average person, needs to understand, too, is you're certainly going to have some bad rounds, you're going to have some bad shots, and it's okay. But the key is, as what Cindy's describing here, is once you learn and understand how to learn from those experiences and take the knowledge that you're getting from, as I said a few moments ago, it's okay to fail. There's nothing wrong with failure. Failure is how we learn. If you don't fail, then there's something wrong, because nobody's perfect. And, you can try to protect yourself and try to do things in such a way to prevent that, but ultimately it's going to happen to everybody at some point in their life. And I think that if you are able to, again, learn, from your failures and even from your successes as well, that's going to help grapple and control the fear a little bit. Fear is probably, in my opinion, if not the number one, close to the number one killer of most people's goals and dreams and things. Is they're because of a failure, they're afraid to succeed, or they're afraid, as you said, to embarrass themselves. So it's so true what you're saying, is that you really need to uncover and look at the specific reasons why you're fearing. Are you fearing that shot? Are you fearing that round? The event. What is it that you're fearing? And isolate it, and then deal with it.
Well, and that's the key right there. So past, current, and anticipated experiences contribute to these, emotions, impatience, disappointment, fear, and other emotions. So once you know the origin, you'll know where the cognitive changes must occur. So again, as Alan said, Cindy, this has nothing to do with your golf swing. It has everything to do with your head. And you're trying to prove something. You're trying to prove your value. You don't need to do that. And Alan has a great line that says, I'm not what I shoot. So don't take personal, it's not a personal attack what you shoot. You have to be able to see clearly where the emotions are coming from, and once you do, then you can do something about changing them. So another thing is goal setting. You got to learn to set goals that will stabilize your emotions rather than trigger them. Is this really realistic? We've got a lot of kids, they want to play D1 golf. I said, well, 85 is not going to cut it. We have to go work on our game enough that you can break 77 at least consistently in a tournament. And there's a huge difference between playing in a junior tournament from the ladies' tees and playing in a college tournament from 62 or 300 yards. Your score is going to go up 5 or 6 shots. So realistic goal setting is one way. Follow the process rather than the outcome. Don't think score. Think, can I do my 3-shot routine on every shot?
Yep.
Another goal might be to try to stay, uninvolved with your round emotionally. Yeah, like, okay, big deal. And then, yay, oh my God, you see how good that was? Or, dread. The score will take care of itself if you stay focused on the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, goal setting is extremely important. Once you establish your goals, and they, as you said, they need to be realistic. And I think sometimes we're our own worst enemy. I think sometimes we set goals a little bit too unrealistic, too high, and that's why it's good to have little goals along the way. You may have an ultimate goal, like, as you said, maybe you want to play at a college level if you're a junior, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you need to set little goals along the way that are very attainable and that are going to help you towards that ultimate goal. Because if you just sort of set that you want to play in college and you don't really have anything to sort of feed you along, you may not reach that goal, and you're setting yourself up for failure and disappointment potentially. Some people may not. Some people may be lucky and just very good players and may accomplish that. But you have to set little goals along the way, I believe, in order to facilitate the larger goals long term.
Absolutely. Another thing that you can do, a recommendation, is to develop, again, a strong mental routine. If you have a mental routine, you know what you're going to do when you walk up to a shot. You're going to inspect your options. You're going to check the yardage. You're going to look at the lie. You're going to figure out the wind and the temperature, and you're going to acknowledge stupid, which we've gone over this. Where with stupid is the ball, and I'm going to go over here on the other side because that's where it's best for me to play this from. It's every time you get to a shot, it's an opportunity to perform and do a new challenge. It's taking on a challenge every time you hit a shot. So if you choose what you want to think about as you prepare to hit your shot, it can really help you with your mental routine. So what's the routine? How do you do it? Because your brain can only be thinking one thing at a time, and you need to be in control of what it's thinking. So it may be saying and screaming in the background, oh, my God, don't hit it in the water. And now, hang on a minute. I'm busy. I've got to look at the yardage. I've got to get onto the green. I can hit this far. Stupid would be short. I'm going to add some yardage, so I'm going to take a club that I'm not having an ego issue with. I don't want to try to hit a 9 when it's really a 7-iron. So I can still miss the 7-iron and be on the green. So use the mental routine for you to be able to displace the yelling subconscious mind of fear so that your conscious mind will be taking control over your subconscious mind. That's basically what I'm trying to say.
Right. Probably if I was to make a suggestion to the listeners out there, as a routine, probably one of the best things that I could suggest you doing the next time you're watching a tournament is, instead of focusing on the the swing that the player is making, watch their routines. Watch how they prepare for each shot, and you'll see that there's a definite pattern. But particularly when you see a situation which you don't see a lot of in every round, but you will see it a few times, usually within most of the rounds, is you'll see every once in a while a player will back off a shot. Maybe the crowd's gotten a little bit noisy, a holdover, or something's happened. You see that sometimes often at the Masters because, especially around 15, 16, and 17, the greens and tee boxes are very close. And a lot of times you'll see somebody on 15 will back off a putt. But what you'll notice is they will take a moment or two, they will pause, and then they will get into their routine again. And that's where they're adapting their mental routine. They're going through all their checks and balances, if you will, in preparation for that shot. So that's something very important for a high handicapper to really pay attention. Forget about the swing. Pay attention to what the player is doing as they're preparing for the shot, because that's extremely important in the preparation and handling of your mental routine. Go ahead, Cindy.
That's, absolutely a great recommendation. The other thing is that I'm not sure that I've become very aware of how difficult playing the game is at a high level, and the mental task that it is. Again, we've been doing a lot of playing lessons, and I said to my group on Saturday, do you realize all the tasks that your mind has to accomplish and be aware of, and that when you're playing a game in a tournament, you only have 45 seconds to hit the ball from when it's your turn. So you need to check your thoughts. There is no time for fear and look out and what is she thinking of my swing. You really have to pay attention to the task at hand. So, again, when you inspect the source, you figure out the yardage, what's your lie look like, what's the wind doing, what's the temperature, what's my best play from here, where should I go, what club am I going to hit? Do you even know what club you hit certain distances? There's not a lot of time for dilly-dally. So, again, as Annika said, in the story about the U.S. Open a few weeks ago, her three-shot routine takes 30 to 35 seconds. You only have 45 seconds to hit the ball. So you really need to be aware of what is my routine and what am I thinking.
Exactly.
In between shots, if you're dwelling on things that you can't control, OB, what others are shooting, the difficulty of the greens, you got to stop and become very aware of those thoughts and say, no, that's enough. Stop. Let's go think about what we're having for dinner, what you're going to buy the kids, anything besides poor little old me.
Sometimes you have to clear your mind of obviously you have to stay in the moment, when you're playing in a round, but sometimes you do have to clear your mind a little bit, especially if you've got a lot of negative thoughts coming in your head. Sometimes you just have to clear it and take a step back and just think about something else. Like you said a few weeks ago, learn to smell the roses along the way, smell the flowers and look at the scenery and just enjoy the day and not get so wrapped up on being so over-focused that
and be aware and able to widen your focus and know when to narrow the focus. And maybe you have a little bit of an anchor, So I slap myself. I tap myself on my leg. When shift states, let's go. We're doing something different now. So, anyway, one of the last ones here is body checks. Maybe several times throughout your round, check your body for tension. How you doing? You grinding your teeth? Where's your head? Are you walking tall? Try to intercept tension as early in the round as possible by using a technique of your choice to relax. So what I tend to do is deep breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth, control my thoughts, think nice, warm, fuzzy thoughts rather than look out, be careful, anxious thoughts that will make your emotions be high and fearful and will create tension, and then tension is the killer of the golf swing. So try to stay in tune. Deep breathing is probably the most popular relaxation technique. Sometimes I'll tighten up all my muscles, and then I'll try to relax them all. Do you have anything that you use?
I do deep breathing as well, and what a lot of times I will do, and is I will just literally, and it's not, believe me, it's not always easy, but I try to clear my mind. I'll lift my head up, especially if it's a beautiful sunny day, and I'll just, obviously have my eyes closed. I don't want to burn out the retinas looking into the sun, but that's not good for your golf game. But, a lot of times I will just, take some deep breaths, and I'll just let the sun sort of shine down in the warmth, and I'll think about, just the warmth on my face and not think about anything else and just clear my thoughts. But I do a lot of deep breathing as well, and that is so important. It does make a big difference. And, really the things that, that we've talked about here in this series, Cindy, to the average person might sound like a lot, but really most of it happens within really milliseconds in our thought process, because our brain works at such a high and fast function level. But, these are things that people really need to think about and understand how to help them through, not just their golf, but their daily lives. And, these are some great things, and I'm glad that you're bringing this series to the listeners. I think it's fantastic. But the body checks, that's one of the things that I do is some deep breathing. And just real quick, we talked about this a few moments back, but, one of the things that I often see, and I'm sure you've seen it as well, Cindy, is when you're seeing a student walking up, on the practice tee, and they're getting ready for their lesson, you can automatically identify just on the way they're walking up, their body language, what kind of an experience that you're going to have with them. Because a lot of times, like I say, if they're slumped over, or you'll ask them something, Sally or John, you're ready for a great lesson. It's, are you ready to have some fun in that? And it's, well, I'll try. That's kind of, right away, that they're setting themselves up. And that's really what we're talking about.
They do. It's their attitude.
Exactly.
And I can understand the frustration that comes with playing poorly, but and their experiences. I mean, they may have taken lots of lessons and never gotten results, so they're probably, they could be thinking, oh, here we go again. I'm wasting my time and money. There is no hope here. So, again, I use it as a little internal competition of, you're going to leave this lesson tee hitting it better than you ever thought you were able. And, if I make that happen, I get a little mental trophy for Cindy. And then they leave with a big smile on their face. Everything is a game, Ed. Everything is a game.
Yeah, exactly, and it's meant to be fun. And the thing is, if you don't allow yourself to have fun playing golf, it can be one of the most frustrating things. Most other sports, you can kind of get away with. I mean, most people can kind of throw a baseball, and most people can, maybe dribble a basketball and get a few of them in the nets, and they don't really care so much because it's not the same thing. But golf is such a precise game. You're hitting a little ball with a club face that's not much bigger into a hole that's not much bigger yet, and it's several 100 yards away. It can be a very difficult sport, but it can also be a very rewarding sport as well, and game. And you're right, it is a game. That's all it is. It's a game. Treat it as such.
Exactly.
Go out and have fun.
Well, and I must tell you too that there are a couple of programs that I, in fact, found and became certified in, of course, because that's what I do. And one of them is the M-Wave, used to be called the Freeze Framer, that helps you learn to focus, concentrate, and relax. So M-Wave is made by HeartMath, and you put a sensor on your ear or your finger, and it helps you learn, to manage your thoughts and to breathe and really learn to relax. And it's like an EEG sensor thing that you can see the results.
Right.
The second thing that I use is called the Interactive Metronome. And Alan, of course, my husband, thought I was crazy when I wanted to purchase the Interactive Metronome to learn how to be shift states and help my timing and focus and the ability to focus on the task at hand. And so the Interactive Metronome is typically used for brain injuries and strokes and autism, and physicists and speech and hearing facilities use it, but we use it for golf. And there's a lot of tour players that do use the program as a home unit to practice and learn how to better focus and concentrate. We've done it with a couple of the Buffalo Bills and Interactive Metronome. You know, if you want more information, email me at cindy@cindymillergolf.com. It's hard to explain, but boy, it's a great program. One of the last things here that we have is an acceptable performance margin. You know, it says reduce your levels of perfectionism and expectation, and that can really help reduce the emotion you experience while competing. And by competing, I mean just playing at your country club with your friends. If you tend to be a perfectionist, which again we'll have the behavior assessment here in a couple weeks. If you tend to be a perfectionist, you probably experience great emotional reactions to a less than perfect shot. You also may tend to react emotionally to bad bounces, changes in weather, especially tough greens or unfair courses. So, again, you know, my big deal, and Alan has taught me this, you know, she who misses it best without getting kicked off wins. I used to complain about this girl that would beat me like a drum at every qualifier for the Legends Tour, and I would get in the car and I would say, I can't believe she beat me by one again. She doesn't hit it any better than me. In fact, she hits it worse. And Alan just looked at me and he said, she misses it better than you. Yeah. And I'm like, what's that mean? You know, I don't want to miss it. Yeah, but you have to learn to miss it better. Lower your expectations. Learn to play your game your way. You could scrape it around with a half-swing fairway finder and play better than you did today. And I was like, oh, you know what? So maybe you just need to change your mindset. And truly, that helps.
Well, and you know, the thing is, just very quickly in closing, you know, when you're playing a round of golf, for those of you listening out there, you're going to come in and weather is going to be a factor. As Cindy said, you're going to have some bad bounces along the way. Sometimes you might have what they call a member's bounce, and it might be in your favor, but more often than not, it's not going to be. It's going to be, you know, against you. You're always going to, regardless of where you're playing, there's going to be some tough greens, and courses aren't meant to be completely fair. That's the whole purpose. It's meant to be a challenge. So, you know, you have to, in order to become a better player and help reduce some of the emotion, as Cindy had said, you know, you need to reduce those levels of perfectionism and expectations and not be unrealistic for your game. Now, obviously, some that play at a higher level might have higher expectations, you know, some of the tour players do. But if you're, you know, a weekend warrior, if you will, you know, you're not going to – you might be lucky and go out and shoot an 85 one day. Don't expect that the next time you go out there you're going to shoot 85. You might shoot 95 or you might shoot 105. So be realistic for your game. But if you do these different steps that Cindy's talking about and listen to the program and tune in every week here on the Women of Golf and listen to some of the things that Cindy and I are talking about here in this great series, it's going to help you to understand to play your game and to really truly own your game. And that's really what this is all about. We want to make you better golfers. We want to make you better players. But more importantly, we want you to go out and have fun and just enjoy playing this great game like Cindy and I do every day. Cindy, any final thoughts on this series today?
No, but I think, you know, I believe that this part of the game is not talked about enough. And I'm very glad that you're giving me the opportunity to share all this. And I love being a living laboratory to help people learn to get better and to be open and honest. And I hope and pray that all these people listening will get something out of this. And I really appreciate it. And I thank you very much. And I thank the listeners for staying tuned. And if you have any questions, email me, Cindy@CindyMillerGolf.com.
Perfect. Well, Cindy, we've come to the close of another show, and we want to thank, Cindy and I both want to take this opportunity to thank all of the listeners from around the world that are tuning into the Women of Golf broadcast. We certainly look forward to having you join us here each Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time here on blogtalkradio.com. We'll be back next week with part 8 of Own Your Game series that brought to you by, of course, our hard-working gal in golf, LPGA professional Cindy Miller. And we're going to continue on with this series, and I believe, well, I'll keep it a secret for now. We'll release it next week. But if you've missed any of the preceding episodes, you can go back to blogtalkradio.com/Women of Golf and scroll down through the on-demand section. All of the programs, of course, are recorded during the live broadcast. So you can go, if you happen to miss and you're not able to tune in during our live broadcast, we want to make sure that you go and listen to them afterwards, because it's a great series and you get something out of it. And don't forget, you can tune in each and every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time here on Blog Talk Radio to get Cindy and I live. And if you want to reach Cindy, you can do so through her website at cindymillergolf.com, and her personally through Cindy at cindymillergolf.com is her email, pardon me. But thank you guys for tuning in. Have a great week, and happy 4th of July to all my American friends here in the United States. Cindy, thanks, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you. Have a great week.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.